fill in the space here for a minute or so, just to give us some room for the share to go out. It's always goes live before we know it, so it's like it's probably live right now, and I'm still talking. Or sometimes I'm like, oh, is it live yet? I think it did go live. Well, hello, free people of the Rocky Mountain region. Welcome to this week's legislative activism call, where we look at some of the most important bills coming through our state legislature this week. We do it every week during the legislative session. We've been doing it. This is week 16. Thankfully, we are getting towards the end of the legislature, ending just about May 8th or so, that second week of May during that 120-day session. So thankfully, the damage is minimized on some level because we don't have a year-round legislature like other states. Other states as well have much longer a legislative session. So I think we'd all agree that this legislative session every year is too long. There's too many bills being introduced. There's too much damage these politicians are allowed to get away with. But nonetheless, we're doing what we can, trying to raise awareness, get people to show up and speak out at committee hearings to have an impact. It's really the most important part about having a representative government is to have communication between the voters, between people in the community, and the elected representatives. These elected representatives need to hear from the people. They need to know that people are unhappy with some of the way the direction is going, and of course, need to know if there's good bills that they need to support as well. So every week we live stream. Please check that out on Free State Colorado YouTube channel. We got a lot of fun bills to talk about this week. Some real craziness, unfortunately, but that's how it goes. So I think we're going to go ahead and get started. On the call here, we got Michael Vance, Legislative Director of the Libertarian Party of Colorado. How are you, Michael?
I'm doing good, Brandon. Wish the Avs were doing a little bit better today, but excited to get going with this call.
Hey, we don't have to feel guilty about missing the Avalanche game because they're getting their butts kicked right now. So we
Absolutely.
could. We also have Hannah Goodman, the chair of the Libertarian Party of Colorado. Madam Chair, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm happy to be here. I love discussing my favorite sport, Colorado legislature, with you.
Definitely a lot more fun than regular professional sports. That's so boring sometimes. We also have Jody Nickerson, a great activist who shows up and speaks at the state capitol. Jody, how are you today?
Doing great. Anxious to get down there. I guess tomorrow's going to be a big day, so I'm anxious to get down there and be in front of them.
Definitely a lot of big bills going through the legislature, a lot being heard in the House and the Senate, on the floor, the committee of the whole. But we really focus, like Jody does a great job showing up at these committee hearings. So this call, we really focus on the committee hearings of the week. The committees are where you, as an individual, as a citizen, as a voter, as a person, have an opportunity to show up, speak out, have 2-3 minutes to speak truth to power, to look these legislators in the eyes and tell them you're not going to follow along with their tyranny. And it's really empowering, and more people need to do it. We got to show up and really make our voices heard for the bad bills and make our voices heard for the good bills as well. But we're live on YouTube, and I'm going to go ahead and record as well. So I'm going to record it on my computer for making some clips later. So awesome. So we're going to go ahead and jump in here. And let's look at some of the bills we discussed last week. So we looked at these bills. Let's see what the outcome was in their committee hearings last week. So 1130, privacy of biometric identifiers and data, that did pass. It's a good privacy bill, so good to see that pass. The indeterminate sex offender sentencing was killed. Relatively surprising because there's been some bills that have been kind of friendly to people who are sex offenders, I guess is one way to put it, this legislative session, but thankfully this bill was stopped. School choice in kindergarten, Ron Weinberg's great resolution there did get killed. No surprise there, unfortunately. Committee Resolution 1004. That was a very interesting one from Bob Marshall. Relatively surprised to see that passed. Definitely check out our discussion on it last week if you're interested. The Senate Bill 20, alcohol beverage delivery and takeout, passed. Good pro-liberty bill there. Good to see that's continuing to move through the legislature. House Bill 1330, air quality permitting, a bad anti-industry bill, passed, of course. Senate Bill 53, the racial equity study, for trying to come up with reparation programs or whatever, unfortunately passed. Tuesday of last week, we had House Bill 1438, the Implement Prescription Drug Affordability Program, passed. Senate Bill 11, the online facilitated misconduct, that was the online dating website bill where the state government is trying to further regulate the online dating scene, unfortunately did pass. House Bill 1366, the Sustainable Local Government Community Planning. We had some really good input from Monument Mayor and Monument Pro Tem Mayor last week on that bill. Unfortunately, did pass. Senate Bill 33, the lodging property tax treatment. That was the bill to quadruple property taxes on Airbnbs, on Verbos, on second vacation homes that maybe people are renting out. That faced so much scrutiny, it did get killed. There's another bill slightly related to we'll talk about this week, but really happy to see that bill die. Senate Bill 192, the motor vehicle lemon law, did pass. Last week on Wednesday, we also had House Bill 1010, insurance coverage, passed, an unfortunate bill there. Senate Bill 188, public school finance. Of course, public school has been a disaster here in Colorado. So unfortunately, no surprise it passed, but unfortunately it did. Senate Bill 201, the increased massage therapy education program hours. Everybody here can rest easy knowing that our massage therapists in Colorado now have to have further schooling and more hours of whatever practice before they can massage people. Wow. Really thankful for our legislators for that ridiculous, horrible bill. It did get amended. I didn't really look at the amendments, but it did pass. Senate Bill 195, protect vulnerable road users, passed. Senate Bill 131, prohibiting carrying firearms in sensitive spaces, passed out of committee. A really bad bill. It did get stripped down a lot, but nonetheless still bad. House Bill 1447, that was the transit reform that would take away RTD's elections and allow governor's appointments instead. That's going to be amended out of it, is the word. That bill got delayed, I think, because of so much pushback from local communities, from RTD itself. So interesting to see where that's going to go. Thursday of last week, excuse me, House Bill 1334, the broadband service for multi-unit buildings. Michael had some really good input on that one. That did pass. Repealing the Colorado Digital Token Act did pass, Senate Bill 180. The new public school finance formula passed. Equity, diversity, inclusion, social, and child welfare passed. And so, to some people's surprise, House Bill 1028 in its first Senate committee did die. It did pass out of the state House, moved on to the Senate, where it was killed in its first committee hearing. The overdose prevention centers will not be allowed in Colorado. 30 in a row that bill's been killed. So, a lot of bills we discussed last week, but let's go ahead and jump in and see what's going to be heard this week down at the state legislature. All right. So digging in, Monday, Senate Bill 171 being heard in the House Agriculture Committee here, restoration of wolverines. And unfortunately, we're not talking about the wolverines from Red Dawn, because I would definitely support that, wolverines. But unfortunately, another bill where the legislators think they can legislate biology and ecosystems and really try and create their little system here by bringing wolverines back into Colorado, of course, on the taxpayer dime. Love to get some feedback from people on this one.
So I'm going to give you a lot of feedback. I mean, we look at, there's all these news headlines in the past 2 days about wolf packs hunting and taking down a lot of livestock recently. And so wolverines, right, they're very aggressive, right? Badgers are really aggressive. Wolverines are 1,000 times more aggressive. I don't know anyone that doesn't put down a badger as soon as they see it. It'll ruin your field. It'll fight other animals. I think they're absolutely beautiful. Don't get me wrong. I think animals are incredibly beautiful. But what are we doing here? We're creating messes of the ecosystems rather than supporting them. And I just have a lot of bad things to say about this, specifically in combination when we think about what's happening with the wolf situation.
Definitely great points. Yeah, it's unfortunate. We've saw all these calves being killed by wolves up in Grand County, up in the mountain areas, and adding wolverines, yeah, it's only going to compound the problem, and of course they're not going to let you hunt them. They're not going to let you use lethal force to dissuade these animals from killing your livestock. Just wait until it's somebody's pet, or hopefully not never a small child, but it could happen. And unfortunately that's the consequences of legislation like this.
I have a lot of experience with wild animals in that I canned hide for a time. I started canning hide with badgers, and they're not even nearly the size. Their claws, they have these claws. Absolutely gorgeous. I love to deal with animals in that way and process them. But I just can't. They're dangerous. It's dangerous. It's fluffy and cute for people who don't have to live in these rural areas. But as in, I live in an extreme rural area. The fact that we would be held hostage by people that live in the city who have never even hardly been outside of a city, would hold us hostage, releasing wild and aggressive animals into our habitat. We are a part of the habitat. Humans are also animals. We also live here, right? To think that humans are separate from their ecosystem is crazy. And it's not rational and it's not scientific to think of it that way. So it just amazes me the unscientific nature of these people.
Definitely extremely unscientific. I mean, they just want to totally disrupt ecosystems and put these dangerous animals in places that they don't necessarily need to be. I mean, there's a reason that some of these predators were kind of hunted and pushed out of society, you know. Just wanted to show people the history here. This bill did pass through the Senate, did get amended, passed through the Senate, is now in the House. So knowing that it made it through the Senate, I expect this bill probably to pass through the House. But of course, it's going to have its first committee hearing in the House this Monday. So tomorrow, April 22nd, 1:30 p.m., House Committee Room 107, in the Agriculture, Water, and Natural Resources Committee. So, you know, we do these calls really trying to encourage people to reach out to the people on this committee, make your voice heard, you know, find out who your elected representative, elected senator are, and reach out to them and let them know what you think on these bills that we discuss. You know, it's really about empowering individuals to have a voice and to get involved in our local government here in Colorado. So there's that bill, unfortunate bill. Seeing Perry Will on there as well, the Republican co-sponsor. Kind of unfortunate, but there we go. All right, let's jump on here to the next bill. Bill we've mentioned before, so I don't want to spend too much time on it, but mention it briefly. You know, you think about how incentives matter in society in terms of creating what kind of businesses there are, even just cultural patterns that people have. A bill like this, House Bill 1380, the regulation of debt-related services, you know, is coming out on the side of debtors, right? And that's not surprising, knowing the bill sponsors, Javier Marbre, Lisa Cutter, Sonia Hequez Lewis. They're not people who are on the pro business side or the pro like financial side. They're on the other side of it, right? Trying to stand up for debtors and make it easier for people to uh, skip out on their debts or not pay their bills. So just wanted to bring this up. You know, I can't help but think of Ayn Rand with this type of legislation and thinking about how who is this legislation serving and how is that changing society in terms of incentivizing certain types of behavior. So the bill has been amended quite a bit, but of course, you know, a bill to make it harder for debt collectors, collection agencies to operate, which, you know, is an important function of society where people take on debts and don't pay it back. I mean, those aren't the people we should necessarily be protecting on some level. This bill did pass all the way through the House, is going in the Senate. This bill might be a little bit more challenged in the Senate. It'll be on the Senate Judiciary Committee being heard tomorrow, April 22nd, 1:30 p.m. in the old Supreme Court, so in the state Capitol building there.
If you think about it, it's a symptom of a much larger problem. The fact that we have so many people having to declare bankruptcy and have all of this debt and all of these things, that's a root problem of the economic policies from the federal level government all the way down. Um, we should be working at what creates a stable economy, what creates good, sound monetary policy, what creates good, sound money and reduces inflation. This bill is not going to do that. It's only going to add to the problem. So this bill is, like you say, Ayn Rand, the Ayn Rand in my soul just like died thinking about it. Yeah, it's literally going to create more of a problem than already exists as far as inflation and not being able to live because prices are so high of everything. Which I do feel bad for people having to declare that they are not able to pay their debts. It's rough out there, you know. I know I'm a gas and oil family on a single income. It's rough out there right now.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely rough out there. Unfortunately, legislation like this doesn't necessarily help. It might help a certain segment of the population, of course, but this kind of bill is also a really good insight into the mind of people like Marbury, who's a Democratic Socialist of America, and kind of their philosophy when it comes to crafting legislation. You know, they're trying to help be on this a certain. They're picking sides, right? They're not trying to be this neutral arbiter of law and constitutional laws here in our state. They're really trying to pick sides and say, hey, there's this type of class of people, or there are these people in our society. We want to protect them, help them, elevate them. And yeah, that means at the expense of some of these other people, like people who are loaning out the money to, you know. So Interesting. Want to bring this one up. Hopefully, this faces some more criticism in the Senate. Definitely encourage people to reach out to your state senators and the committee members on this one.
One last thing I want to bring up with this bill is going to unnaturally raise interest rates on people and make it harder to take out loans. So this is actually going to be overall, this is going to be a harmful bill to the economy of Colorado.
Yeah, well said, Michael. 100%. When you're making it harder for people to collect the money owed to them, they're going to be a little bit more restrictive in terms of who they loan that money out to, right? So yeah, higher interest rates, higher lending standards. But of course, that'll create another problem that these legislators want to try and come in and solve, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
All right, moving on. Still on Monday here, so this is going to be heard tomorrow in the State Senate Transportation and Energy Committee. This is access to distributed generation. Now, I really wanted to bring this one up because, of course, Colorado just experienced some extreme windstorms. Hundreds of thousands of people lost power for maybe even up to a couple of days. For some of them, so this bill, of course, is going to compound that problem and make it a little bit more difficult. And I really think of, more rural areas or areas with smaller utility companies could really suffer under this. So Senate Bill 207 is concerning access to distributed energy and in connection therewith, establishing requirements for the development of inclusive community solar capacity that investor-owned electric utilities must make available to utility customers and requiring the acquisition of distributed generation facilities paired with energy storage. So, just to give a little bit more information, on or after January 1st, 2026, but before February 1st, 2026, an investor owned electric utility with more than 500,000 customers must make at least 50 megawatts of inclusive community solar capacity available, and a utility with 500,000 or fewer customers must make at least 4 megawatts of inclusive solar available. So you can see here, this is a mandate on utilities, really trying to force these utility companies to provide solar. I mean, what's that going to do to these utility companies? If it's not beneficial to them financially, they would already be doing it if it was, right? If it was a really good market mechanism for them to make some more money, provide more electricity at lower costs, then they would already be doing it. But unfortunately, mandates like this push things in the wrong direction. So you're talking about higher utility costs. You're talking about maybe a less stable grid because forcing a utility company to spend its limited resources on something that's not quite as efficient, like solar, might make electricity less available in the event of a windstorm or something we just saw. So unfortunate to see Matt Soper. He's a Republican, shouldn't be on this type of bill, but he's made some really bad decisions this year, unfortunately. No surprising seeing all the other Democrat sponsors on it.
He's been on some of the worst bills this session for sure.
He killed a really good bill, if we remember.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely unfortunate. Hopefully we really want to see, I wish the Republicans would maintain a pro-liberty position down at the state capitol. We have some really good pro-liberty Republicans down there, but not all of them are. I mean, that's the reality of it.
I
So
would
this
say the
bill,
ones that are a minority.
right, a minority of a minority. And my Republicans are already in a minority, and then the liberty-minded ones are even a smaller minority of that caucus, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So this is the first time the bill is going to be heard. So it'll be in the Transportation Energy Committee Monday, April 22nd, 1:30 p.m. Senate Committee Room 352. So that's the third floor of the state capitol there. Check that out if you're interested. Definitely a hot topic that's becoming even a bigger deal in light of recent electric grid instability that we've seen these past couple weeks. All right. Of course, they're going to push this green agenda at the expense of everything else here. So House Bill 1299, we've talked about Senate Bill 33 that got killed, and that was to raise taxes on Airbnbs and verbos throughout the state. That bill got killed, not too surprising because of the outcry, but this bill seems to kind of follow the same lines as the other one. So concerning the classification of short-term rental units for purposes of property tax treatment, the bill defines a short-term rental unit as a building that is designed for use predominantly as a place of residency. Okay, a commercial short-term rental unit is defined as a short-term rental unit that is not the owner's primary or secondary residence, really. So this is just third, so not even your first or second, so that's interesting. But basically, they want to classify a commercial short-term rental unit as lodging property, which means it would be under commercial property taxes, which are 29% assessment rate as opposed to the 7% assessment rate that residential property has. So interesting to see this bill get introduced. I think it's kind of possibly a watered down version of Senate Bill 33 that got killed. But nonetheless, this will be its first committee hearing. It'll be in the House Finance Committee, House Committee Room 112 at 1:30 p.m. Monday, April 22nd. So unfortunate bill. Bill that will raise taxes on people who are just maybe trying to make a little bit of extra income with a property they own, renting it out, trying to alleviate this housing crisis by renting out this property for short-term reasons, that people need, or tourists, whatever, but unfortunately raising taxes on them. Just wanted to look at the fiscal note real quick, just so people can see that they do expect fiscal impacts. I just wanted to see if there's any real interesting notice there, but doesn't really look like there's too much information. It does decrease state expenditures, so that is interesting there. It increases property tax collections from school district, total program mill levies, allowing an equivalent decrease in the state share of total program. So, of course, messing with property taxes, mill levies in special districts like school districts, of course, are bigly affected. So, all right, moving on. House Bill or House Concurrent Resolution 1001, a good bill. So we talked about our Liberty leaders down at the state capitol. We got Representative Ken DeGraff, Representative Stephanie Luck. They're two of the fighters down there. One of the highest rated from Colorado Union of Taxpayers, or the Colorado Liberty Scorecard, which tracks all the legislation and ranks all the legislators every year. Those two are always at the top, have been at the top of the list. So no surprise that they're kind of moving in the other direction, allowing seniors to exempt their property tax payments and letting them pay less taxes, keeping seniors in their home. I mean, this seems like a good bill that way. So right now, if you're a senior in Colorado and you've occupied your primary residence for 10 years, you get a tax exemption, property tax exemption on the first $200,000 of actual value. Now, if this is approved by voters, this concurrent resolution will allow a senior or surviving spouse of such a senior who was previously qualified to be able to claim that exemption for their current primary residence, regardless of how long they've owned and occupied that residence. So this means that seniors who have been in their home for 10 years in Colorado and then moved would still be able to maintain that property tax exemption. So good bill that way to lower property taxes for our seniors and help provide some much needed property tax relief.
Now, let me ask you this, Brandon. I want to ask the Natalie Minton question: how is this going to affect Tabor?
That's a good question. How would this affect Tabor? Well, I mean, it potentially means less property taxes are being collected. Let's look at the fiscal note here to see what it says about Tabor. Of course, it would reflect that impact that Tabor refund, because let's see here what it says about Tabor. So reimbursements to local governments for the homestead property tax exemptions are the first of 3 Tabor refund mechanisms under current law. A Tabor surplus collected in one fiscal year is set aside to fund these reimbursements in the following fiscal year. So potentially, this could mean that there's less Tabor money to get refunded out to people. So that money potentially could come from a different place, I suppose. So good question. Don't know entirely the best way to dive into that, but it looks like potentially less tax money is being collected overall. But as this points out, there's different ways that Tabor allows for the refund of this overcollected tax money to people, and the homestead property exemption is one of them. So this bill would alter that, really.
That's good to know.
I guess you got to kind of weigh the pros and cons for our expenditures, going out for the taxes. I'm a senior in my home. I get the homestead exemption. I've been in over 10 years at the home. But that's a very good question. How I still get the exemption, but does this lessen? Oh, so if I moved, I'd still be able to not have to be in there for 10 years to qualify. So this lets me transfer it over.
Correct.
Gotcha. But I still get a Tabor even though I have homestead.
Right. So good bill from some of our Liberty leaders down there. We'll see what happens. I expect this bill probably be killed in the committee there, I would expect. So it was discussed previously, and it should be voted on here in the Finance Committee. It was on the calendar there for tomorrow. In the House Finance Committee, all right, another one in the House Finance Committee is another resolution 1006, the property tax revenue growth limit. So last week we talked a little bit about what Bob Marshall's been doing down at the state capitol. Bob Marshall's one of the top targets for Republicans to flip that Democrat-held seat. He won by what I believe is like 700 votes or something like that, like an extremely small margin. So he's definitely one of the top targets. He's been a bad vote on some bad gun bills. So I know a lot of pro-gun voters really want to see him go, but he's been putting forward some bills to kind of make himself a little bit more appealing to some unaffiliated voters and even some Republicans. And this is one of those bills. So this is a resolution that would be submitted to the registered electors of the state of Colorado as an amendment to the Colorado Constitution concerning a new annual property tax revenue growth limit, and in connection therewith, limiting each taxing jurisdiction's annual property tax revenue growth from existing taxable property to the percentage by which state revenue growth is limited by the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights plus 2 percentage points. So unfortunately, it'd be a little less restrictive than what Tabor allows. It would allow for more government collection than what Taxpayer Bill of Rights allows. But nonetheless, it's a way to kind of cap and limit the growth of property tax to prevent the big jump that we saw this year. I expect this bill is probably not going to go anywhere in terms of the state House controlled by the Democrats pushing it forward. But nonetheless, an interesting bill. I would see this bill as a way for him to try and really use it for campaigning purposes. Looking at the sponsorship, he's the only sponsor from anywhere. So that's a sign also that there's not really any other buy-in from from the Democrats down there. He's really doing this as a campaign piece, would be my guess.
I don't know how this is a benefit to Bob Marshall, considering how tight his race was last go around. I mean, and then on top of everything happening with Tabor, I mean, in our property taxes exploded, and this guy is going to make it so that way they can grow even more than they
Right.
currently
But
can under Tabor. Hmm?
I get you. I get you. Yeah, but I guess the his point would be he's fighting for property owners down at the state capitol. This is how I imagine he'd use us as a campaign piece to say he's limiting how much property taxes can be collected, preventing that rapid growth. So it still allows for growth, which Tabor does allow for growth as well, but not quite as rapid of a growth as we saw this last cycle for property taxes. So relatively speaking, I mean, we could look at the fiscal note here. Relatively speaking, it could be a good bill in terms of imposing a local government property tax revenue limit. So kind of limiting what they can collect. But nonetheless, kind of a nuanced bill. It'd be interesting for anybody who wants to read into it, but I doubt it's going to go anywhere. But good, good, interesting strategy from Bob Marshall to position himself as a champion for property owners and taxpayers going into a very, very contentious election where he could easily lose his seat. All right. So that bill is going to be heard in the House Finance Committee, House Committee Room 112, 1:30 p.m. Monday, April 22nd. Let's go ahead and move on. I'd love to get people's opinions on this next one. I'm 100% opposed to this House Joint Resolution 1024, calling for an Article 5 Convention of States. So basically, House Minority Leader Rose Puglisi wants to get Colorado pushing for an Article 5 convention, which would allow for adding or changing amendments to the U.S. Constitution and sending a delegation from Colorado to participate in that. Now, of course, champions or people who promote an Article 5 convention see this as an opportunity to push a balanced budget amendment, to push term limits at the federal level. However, I'm extremely skeptical that that's a possibility because the way our politics is going on a national level, I can see this being used as an opportunity to try and have a runaway convention where they could try to repeal the Second Amendment or go after our First Amendment rights or something like that. I would say it's too risky for anybody at this time to try and alter our U.S. Constitution. But I love to hear other people's opinions on this.
I
Go ahead.
heard it being like a really popular idea within the Republican Party. One of the ladies here I politic with, she's like super passionate about this. I'm not certain, I'm not super sure how I feel about it, but it is super popular in the Republican Party. Um, are there, what's the chances of like this actually happening and like an actual convention?
You know, so we'd have to look. There's a certain number of states that would have to put forward this to qualify to actually activate the to trigger the convention for to happen. And there's quite a few states that have passed a resolution calling for a convention of states. Hawaii actually is one that called for it, but for the specific purpose of repealing the Second Amendment. So to give you an idea, of course, they say, well, that wouldn't be allowed. We'd have a convention and be set for these very specific purposes. As you can see here in this, it says to limit the term of office for its officials, for members of Congress, and impose fiscal restraints on the federal government. So that's what the Republicans are pushing, is to amend the Constitution for those reasons. Um, that's what they do. However, I have no trust or faith in the system that that's what it would be used for if they do hold a constitution convention. And all of a sudden, if the Democrats are in control of it and they say, hey, all of a sudden we don't have a First Amendment, we don't have a Second Amendment, we don't have a Fourth Amendment anymore. And the Republicans say, well, that's unconstitutional. You can't do that. That's not following the rules. And the Democrats will say, we don't care. We don't care. We're doing it
Yes,
anyway.
I would agree. I'm also not super crazy about the names that are on this specific bill. I guess probably it won't pass at all. I don't, it'll die at some point. Like Armagost, Evans, Lynch, Soper. Um, I'm less familiar with Bradley, Caitlin, Taggart, Weinberg, and Winter. But
Yeah,
all
I
the
was going to
people
say,
I know are on.
notice that DeGraff and Luck are not on there, right?
Yeah.
Two of the Liberty leaders, and we have some more of the moderate Republicans on there. Although Brandy Bradley's been a really good fighter down there, Weinberg, but some of these people would very much follow that traditional Republican talking points of why this would be a good idea. So yeah, I don't think it's going anywhere. I don't think it's going to pass. Obviously, there's no Senate sponsor. There's no Democrats sponsoring it. Nonetheless, I think it's a scary thing that Republicans should really think twice about promoting. So Monday, April 22nd, State Civic, Military and Veterans Affairs Committee, 1:30 p.m. LSBA. LSB is the Legislative Service Building across the street from the state capitol. They have two committee hearing rooms, and that is in room A. So show up, speak out, reach out to the bill sponsors, the members of the committee if you're interested, but definitely make your voice heard, people. All right, we'll move on. I don't know about all of y'all, but having your hair length discriminated against seems to be a major issue that Colorado Democrats are needing to protect the discrimination based on hair length, but only if that length of hair is associated with your race. So I don't know what problem this is necessarily trying to solve, but if you have hair length and it's because of your race and the way you're wearing your hair associated with your race, then this would push forward an anti-discrimination law for public education, employment, housing practices, public accommodations, advertising, based on that. So, I guess maybe somebody has really long dreadlocks and they're not going to get hired for a position because of it. Maybe that's the case. I don't know. And that's what this bill is trying to solve. But nonetheless, I think that it's not the role of government to tell individuals who they can and cannot freely associate with, and forcing people to associate with somebody who maybe I don't want to associate you because of your hair, but now you're telling me I have to because the state government's going to force me to do so, or else they're going to send the Civil Rights Commission after me, shut down my bakery, and point a gun to my head and tell me you got to do this or we're going to ruin you.
It's not like Colorado has a history of trying to shut down bakeries or anything.
Am I missing
Exactly.
something? Am I missing something that we're not still an at-will state?
Well, there's certain discrimination laws that you're not allowed to violate. So you could be an at-will state in terms of employing, but if they find the reason you're firing somebody from work is based on hair length associated with their race, then yeah, you could be facing some consequences if this bill passes.
I would just be curious, how often does this type of thing, how often are people discriminated against for having hair for their racial type? I guess I would say it happened a lot more in the past. But like today, how often does that actually happen? Like, are they actually doing something that even is relevant? Like when we outlawed child labor laws. Child labor had decreased significantly, was almost non-existent when we passed those. Is that this similar kind of thing?
Old Ben in the comments on YouTube says, "Remember Ben Nighthorse Campbell's ponytail? He was a Native American, had a ponytail, and potentially maybe he was discriminated against because of it. So
Maybe.
maybe I don't know that necessarily happened, but at the same time, it's hard to believe, yeah, in 2024 going forward that somebody who's discriminating somebody based on their hair length, would be able to even get away with that in the court of public opinion, much less that we need a law for that type of thing."
Yeah. Yeah.
So bad bill, ridiculous bill, not the role of government. Monday, 1:30 p.m., LSBA, the State Civic Military and Veterans Affairs Committee. This would be a great bill to get what's his name, Scott, down there to testify on, the guy who does the parody kind of satirical testimony. This could be a really fun one for him. So that'd be good to see. All right, so here we go again with the push by Republicans to push back against the green agenda that the Democrats are pushing so hard. This one's kind of interesting, of course, tying with into China, another topic that the Republicans down there love to bring up. But this would have a resolution concerning government procurement of electric vehicles with forced labor components. So there's not a lot of information here, but let's go and look at the bill text. As you can see, a lot of Republican sponsorship on there, but on both chambers. This bill is saying that a lot of electric vehicles are made with components created by the use of forced labor, including materials mined by the Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities in China's Xinjiang region. So, this would basically say that, because of this slave labor or forced labor that's happening, building these electric cars, that we need to make sure that the state of Colorado opposes the use of forced labor and finds that forced labor is repugnant and deplorable, violates basic human rights, constitutes discrimination, damage free and fair competition, and that the state of Colorado will take steps to ensure that taxpayer dollars are not being used to pay for electric vehicles that may have been partially manufactured through forced labor. So a very interesting bill there.
Yeah, I generally like it. Being that I'm a free market capitalist, I'm not sure that I like regulations on the market. People forget, here in America, we like to talk about slavery in the past and we owe reparations and blah, blah, blah. People forget that slavery literally exists still today, right? And no one's up in arms about it, specifically the people on the side that you think would be that are pushing these green agendas where they're trying to incentivize the purchase of electric vehicles in the market through subsidies and laws and regulations, blah, blah, blah. So generally, I like the idea that we're going to stand up to slavery worldwide. I love that. I don't know that an economic regulation on the market is the best thing we could be doing with the government. So I'm a little mixed.
Yeah, I think it's from the Republican perspective, it's a good bill because they can use it for campaigning on. They say, hey, listen, we tried to push a bill forward that would prevent slave labor from being used in the electric vehicles that the state of Colorado is buying, and the Democrats killed it. That's a relatively good bill there. It appeases the anti-China crowd, which is big in the Republican side, and of course, kind of pushes back against the green agenda. So you're kind of killing a couple birds with one stone on this bill. So pretty interesting. Yeah, I don't know in terms of the effectiveness of this bill, in terms of changing anything or creating a better society or more free society for sure. So being heard Monday in the State Civic Military and Veterans Affairs Committee, 1:30 p.m. LSBA. A lot of interesting bills being heard there. That's going to be the place to be tomorrow if you want to hear about the Article 5 convention, people's hair length, forced labor, building electric vehicles, and an actually great bill, the Parents' Bill of Rights. For one of our Liberty leaders down there, Ken DeGraff, you can already guess that this bill has no chance of going anywhere. The one thing that Colorado Democrats have been pushing is separating parents and children, having the state take over the role of parent over the children. When you see some of the bills pushed by people like Representative Stephanie Vigil, where they're basically saying that, you don't need parents if you have the government, then this bill's DOA. But nonetheless, good effort from Ken DeGraff. Good for him for trying to push this idea. Just to read briefly from it, creating a Parents' Bill of Rights, establishing certain rights for parents, including the right to direct the parent's the parent's child's education, upbringing, and moral or religious training, to enroll the parent's child in a public school, private school, or any other school choice option, to consent to medical or mental health care treatment for the parent's child, to be promptly notified if an employee of the state suspects that a criminal offense has been committed against the parent's child, to consent or withhold consent to the parent's child's participation in reproductive health and safety education programs, to seek medical and religious exemptions from immunization requirements, to opt out of data collection, to opt out of student information surveys, to review all available material that the parent's child has borrowed from the school library as accessed in the classroom, to access the parent child's education records or health records, and to be notified if the parent's child is experiencing gender incongruence. So, wow.
This is a super important bill. It hits a lot of the issues that we're seeing in the fight between parents and schools, and parents' rights and the government overreach on all levels. So this probably is a good pass, but I love it. This is exactly what we need. As a parent, my children are not in public school, so a lot of this doesn't necessarily apply to me. They could, especially with like the health records and things like that. Since now, if you're 12, like your parents don't see your health records or something, I forget what that whole thing is, but I would be affected by that. Wow, this would solve so many problems, and it's right and just that we should protect parental rights. Our children are our product, they produce them. So if you think about it along the lines of property rights, although another human is not your property, you brought them into the world. It's your responsibility to care for them. They're not citizens of the state. They're not property of the state either. So this really helps support that.
Just wanted to highlight this last line here. The concurrent resolution prohibits a healthcare provider, practitioner, or facility from providing, soliciting, or arranging for the treatment of a child without first obtaining written or documented consent from the child's parent. I mean, that's incredible. Really good on Representative Kindegraff. Agree with everything you said there, Hannah. This is an important bill, a great bill. And, bills like this, too, just make me think about how if we had a majority of Kindegraffs down at the state capitol, they would pass something like this. I mean, how incredible would that be? Unfortunately, he's the only sponsor on there. I mean, we know this bill's DOA, but very unfortunate to see that other Republicans haven't joined him in supporting this legislation, and co-sponsoring it or adding their names.
Their silence speaks volumes, and we're listening.
100%. I would really encourage people, if you do have free time tomorrow, if you can do it over Zoom or show up in person, show up and speak in support of this Parents' Bill of Rights bill. It's very, very important that people go down there and support our liberty legislators like Kindegraff, speak out in support of good legislation like this, make your voice heard, get it entered in the record that there's people out there who support this and pushing or want to push back against the state. It's very, very important that we have a participatory government where people make their voices heard. And please, please, if you can, show up, speak out in support of the Parents' Bill of Rights, either over Zoom or in person if you can. It's going to be at 1:30 Monday, LSBA. So that's, again, the building across the street from the state capitol, the State Civic, Military, and Veterans Affairs Committee. Bill's dead on arrival, we know, but nonetheless, it'd be important for an individual to show up and speak out.
This is one I'm definitely going to.
Awesome, Jody. Really appreciate that. Really appreciate you showing up and speaking out. This is great legislation. Parents need to be able to protect their kids, and it's not the government's damn business to try and get in between that relationship between parents and child.
I'm really hoping next legislative session this one gets reintroduced.
Yeah, I would hope so as well. So good, Bill. Happy to see something good down there. Positive outcome potential. It's just if elections matter, folks, get involved in the elections and getting the bad ones out and the good ones in. We could have something like this in Colorado state law. That would be phenomenal. So that's what we got for Monday. A lot going on in the House State Civic, Military, and Veterans Affairs Committee, 3 bills in House Finance, lots of big bills going on Monday down in committees. Again, committee hearings, you can show up, speak out. It's your opportunity as an individual. But let's jump into Tuesday. See what we got going on Tuesday this week, the 23rd. Now, this is getting a lot of controversy, some interesting press coverage. I want to bring this up. House Bill 1460, law enforcement misconduct. Law enforcement community is totally opposed to this, as you can imagine. concerning measures to strengthen responses to law enforcement misconduct. So there's a lot here in this bill, but look at some of the highlights here. I'll make this a little bit bigger and easier to see. The bill requires a law enforcement agency that receives an allegation of misconduct, criminal conduct, or other unprofessional conduct regarding a peace officer employed by the agency to investigate the allegation. If a peace officer receives an allegation of misconduct, criminal conduct, or other unprofessional conduct, misconduct, or is reasonably aware of the misconduct of another peace officer, the peace officer shall report the allegation to the subject of the allegation's employing agency. So that's that police accountability piece. A peace officer who fails to make the report commits a class 2 misdemeanor. So how about that? You have a law enforcement officer who witnesses misconduct. They are forced to report it or they face a misdemeanor. A person who makes an allegation has the private right of action if the allegation is not investigated. The bill clarifies that patterns and practices investigations may also be related to deprivation of rights by a peace officer against another peace officer. Current law requires agencies to report certain information regarding officers' misconduct to a database. The Attorney General may audit the reports made to the database to verify reporting compliance. This bill requires the Attorney General to accept reports of non-reporting to the database and requires those reports to be investigated within available resources. Current law requires unedited video and audio recordings of incidents of alleged misconduct to be released to the public upon request. The bill states that a law enforcement agency shall not charge a fee to the requester related to releasing the recording. So there you go. That's great. Current law provides a peace officer with whistleblower protection. This bill allows a peace officer who is subject to whistleblower discipline a private right of action against the officer's employing agency. So protecting whistleblowers. The bill requires each agency to retain all reports regarding allegations of misconduct and all investigation files, notes, and reports related to those reports. The bill requires the investigating agency to provide a copy of the investigation file to the subject of the investigation after it is completed. So very interesting bill. Definitely a bill to strengthen protections by individuals against law enforcement committing a misconduct, unprofessional conduct. So I would say a good bill. I mean, it's hard to see anything in here from a liberty perspective that's bad. I get that, it's placing some new requirements on law enforcement, maybe making it a little bit easier for them to face unreasonable claims of unprofessionalism or unreasonable claims and attacks against them. I could see that as a potential issue where all somebody has to do is claim misconduct and there's this big investigation launched, even though it's extremely unreasonable or doesn't seem to be accurate. But nonetheless, I would have to say the good outweighs the bad in terms of my support of this bill. I think it sounds like a great bill.
I completely agree.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, this is one of those bills too where Republicans are going to fight against it. But, from a libertarian perspective or a pro-liberty perspective, it's probably something they should support and join on to. So, hardly ever agree with Leslie Herod and Jennifer Bacon down there. But nonetheless, pretty good bill. DeGray Kennedy, also a really, really authoritarian legislator, but he is sponsoring it as well. So very interesting bill. And we'll see what happens to it. I would suspect more sponsors on it for it to be likely to pass. I'm surprised that there's not more Democrats, especially you get the Elizabeth Epps and Tim Hernandez's and these socialists who really hate law enforcement, want to abolish the police. I'm surprised that they're not on this bill. So, well, interesting to see if they do get added. This is the first time the bill is being heard in committee. It was just introduced on the 17th, so just last week, and is now going to this Judiciary Committee in the Old State Library, 1:30 p.m., Tuesday, April 23rd. So speak out if you're elected representatives in the Judiciary Committee, let them know what you think about this bill.
Nobody's above us. If you're in the government, whether you're law enforcement or you're one of the members that was elected to serve at the Gold Dome, you're not any better than anybody else. So this is something that should have been done a long time ago, as far as I'm concerned.
Totally.
Definitely. And when you think about, law enforcement going after peaceful gun owners, going after people who are not committing any crime from a libertarian perspective, that there should be some accountability if those law enforcement is violating the rights of the people, for sure. We do have a comment here in the YouTube chat from Jason Fisher asking if there will be a Senate hearing on the assault weapons ban. There will be at some point. It's not on the calendar this week, but I would not be surprised if they add it at the last minute to kind of hide it in a way and not have as much outcry and enough preparation time for people to show up. So we'll see if it gets added to the calendar. We'll keep you updated on that.
Now we're starting to get closer and closer to the time where we start seeing a lot of sneaky stuff happening behind the scenes. Remember last year, it was until the final week of the legislative session that they introduced Senate Bill 303, which turned into Prop HH, and they didn't give anybody any time to even go down to the Capitol and speak out against the garbage that turned into Prop HH. And then what did we end up doing? We shut the thing down by what, 20%, I believe, in what is a state that's now turning deeper and deeper blue as we speak. Hopefully we can make some changes in that regard. But when we did kill Prop HH, they decided to declare a special session, and they went ahead and pushed everything through in three bills when the Colorado Supreme Court said that it did not violate the single line rule. So
Yep.
very, very shady stuff that can happen. But this is the time to watch out and be prepared. So maybe we can call it out before we run into another Prop HH this time, November.
Yeah, so the Senate Military Veterans and Affairs Committee is where the assault weapons ban has been assigned to. They are meeting twice this week, I believe. So keep your eye on those dates. It's not on the calendar, but it could be added at the last minute. So great points, Michael. Definitely, people keep yourself very aware of what's going on down there. So Tuesday, House Bill 1459, birth equity. Birth equity. So, everybody's born equal, I thought. But apparently, you need protections for birthing persons. Birthing persons. So birth equity specifically has to do with restraints on inmates during labor, delivery of child, postpartum recovery, and transport for childcare. So this really has to do with people in prison who are having babies and making sure that they have certain protections and certain rights. Doesn't seem like that bad of an idea. The idea of birth equity is kind of ridiculous overall, but nonetheless, interesting bill.
And the fact that they've replaced woman with pregnant person, I like that they're erasing women from everything. As a woman, I find it despicable and reprehensible, and I find it oppressive, in their own words.
Yeah. Yeah, well said. I mean, yeah, you're either a individual who is pregnant, a birthing person, but there's no mention of women anywhere in this, of course, because that's where they're going with all of this. So interesting bill. This will be its first committee hearing. It was introduced just last week, so bills are still being introduced. They can be introduced to the last minute, as Michael was pointing out. So you really got to pay attention. Tuesday in the Judiciary Committee at 1:30 p.m. in the Old State Library, April 23rd. So interesting bill there. Going to move on. Senate Bill 184. This is a horrible bill. If you watched my last video with Natalie Menton, we talked about this bill. This is Fenberg's attempt to basically fleece the Colorado taxpayers to pay for the ridiculous transportation scheme, including Front Range Rail and mass transit that nobody really wants to use. So this is the Support Surface Infrastructure Transportation Development. Basically, they want to create a congestion impact fee. So really a tax. They call it a fee to get around the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. It should be totally unconstitutional for them to do this. It's extremely scummy of these people to do this. Basically, you get up to $3 per day on a short-term rental of a motor vehicle that is powered by an internal combustion engine, and up to $2 per day for a motor vehicle that is battery electric or plug-in hybrid. So this is creating a new taxation scheme. And, it's not just tourists who use rental vehicles. Natalie pointed out in the video, it's a lot of people who are maybe their car's in the shop. They got into a car accident. Insurance is covering the cost of a rental. Now these costs of rentals are going to increase, which means insurance has to increase, which means everything all around the circle there goes up in price. So totally deceptive practice to call it a fee instead of a tax, which it truly is. This bill does a lot of things as well in terms of deciding where that money is going to go, everything they're trying to do in terms of getting RTD to build the Northwest Rail Fixed Guideway Corridor. So extending that corridor to Fort Collins. But this is a big bill to push through Front Range Rail. Check out that video if you're interested. It's on freestatecolorado.com. But there's this total scheme to this year, lots of bills related to this crazy transport mass transit scheme that is going to be, I can guarantee you, is going to be a boondoggle, waste of taxpayer money. Some people are going to make a lot of money off of it, but very few people are going to actually use it. It's going to take years to get completed, decades, running over costs, and an inferior government product. So bad news for sure.
Not
Not
only
enough.
that, but do billionaires get rental cars regularly? I thought we were only just taxing and paying the billionaires so they could pay their fair share, not the regular people. Regular people buy rental cars, and I don't really believe in taxing billionaires, but all these people do. So what happened to that?
Yeah, great question. It wasn't through forced taxation and forced fees that the John Galt line was built, in Atlas Shrugged, right? I mean, if it was a good idea, the market would have already created it. If it was financially feasible and profitable, then somebody would have built a front range rail system. The reason they haven't is because it's not, because the cost of the infrastructure and the cost of upkeep and running it and putting it all together is going to exceed any potential profit. So from a market perspective, we know it's a bad deal. It's a bad idea. The only way they can push these programs through is to force people to pay for it at the point of a gun by creating these new fees and taxes on them.
If you think about it in Atlas Shrugged, um, what happened to the rail line that Dagny Taggart had was it was stifled and killed by regulation. All of those regulations exist on the books here in the United States. Rail has been an epic failure due to all of those regulations that go even all the way back to the 1800s. So why are we going to build something with the most regulations that's going to be completely inefficient because of that? And like you say, if the market wanted it, it'd be provided for.
100%. 100%. Michael, anything else to add on this one?
Not on this one. You
All
guys
right.
covered it pretty well.
Awesome. Let's jump ahead then. See what else is going on Tuesday down at the state legislature this week. Senate Bill 208. Here we go. Colorado Department of Labor and Employment to regulate electricity for electric vehicles. So, of course, this big electric vehicle push we're seeing. Uh, Senate Bill 208, which concerns the standardization of electric vehicle charging stations, establishing the Electric Vehicle Enterprise and the Electric Vehicle Enterprise Special Revenue Fund. So an enterprise, that's a key word for people who've been watching these videos. That's a bad thing. That means they're going to have some new fees instead of taxes by calling it an enterprise, which is a phony little idea for a business, not even a real business, but that's what they call it. So that you're going to create this little enterprise that you have to follow to synchronize electric vehicle charging protocols to create consistency and transparency for electric vehicle charging consumers. The enterprise constitution's enterprise for the purposes of Section 20 of Article 10. That's the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. See, they point that out that it doesn't, Taxpayer Bill of Rights does not apply. So long as it retains the authority to issue revenue bonds and receives less than 10% of its total annual revenue and grants from all Colorado state and local governments combined, so long as it constitutes an enterprise, the enterprise is not subject to the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. They say it right there. That's Section 20 of Article 10 is the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. So those are always key words as you're looking at legislation down at the state capitol to keep an eye on. Enterprises and Section 20, Article 10. There's going to be a board of directors. They're going to impose and collect a fee beginning July 1st, 2025, to be paid by each electric vehicle charging station retailer based on the total number of retail electric vehicle charging stations operated by the retailer and the total number of power supply devices used at such stations. They're going to take that money and then use that to regulate electric vehicles. So, there you go, creating rules, minimum standards, specifications, and tolerances for these retail electric vehicle charging equipment. In a way, as somebody like myself who's opposed to this whole green agenda and electrification of society because it's a unrealistic pipe dream, this is kind of a good bill because as government regulations are going to make this industry a little bit more stifled. It's going to be a little bit more expensive and harder for them to operate. So this bill is actually going to hurt the electric vehicle market, in my opinion there. So bills being heard Tuesday in the Finance Committee, Senate Committee Room 357 at 2 p.m. Interesting bill, another example of this whole green agenda they're pushing, which is going to eventually leave us all in the dark and impoverished. All right, moving on. Still in Tuesday, House Bill 1313. Bill we've talked about before, something definitely to keep an eye on. Basically, housing and transit-oriented communities. They want to create transit-oriented communities in which, depending on your housing opportunity goals and creating high density housing around mass transit, then you're going to get government funding based on that. So, the highway tax funds and other funds that the state government collects, they really only want to give it to the towns and communities that are playing ball, playing along with this little mass transit scheme that they're doing and forcing them to try and build high density housing around transit corridors, because then, hey, who needs a car if you got the light rail right there? So another example of this high density agenda, really big bill, lots of information in this bill, but definitely, it will identify local governments that must create, report, and implement a housing opportunity goal to increase housing inventory, or they forfeit their allocations of the Highway Users Tax Fund. It's a lot of money from the state. The Department of Local Affairs, in collaboration with the Colorado Energy Office and the Colorado Department of Transportation, must provide broad technical assistance to affected local governments, administer a grant program to assist with planning, compliance, and infrastructure projects, increases the amount of affordable housing tax credits that can be issued by the Colorado Housing and Finance Authority, and creates a new state income tax credit for taxpayers that invest in qualified low-income housing project located in a transit-oriented community. So there you go. Basically trying to redesign Colorado's small communities across the state to fit this model that they want to see. They want to see downtown Denver replicated all across Colorado. So bad bill, absolutely really bad bill to redesign society and withhold funding from local communities who don't want to go along with this scheme. This bill has been heard a few times, has made it through the House, is now in the Senate. The Senate might try and amend it or push it back a little bit, but unfortunately, I think there's enough local government support for this bill that it's probably going to go through on some level. So really bad bill. Go
How are
ahead.
local governments actually supporting this bill?
There's some local governments who buy into this agenda and want to see more tax revenue come to them, and they want to see more grants come to them because they're already following this agenda already. But there's a lot of small communities out there. I would imagine probably our guest last week, Mayor Monument, and other people out there who probably oppose this bill.
Yeah, Jessica Penske, when she ran for Arvada City Council and was attending city council meetings, they were setting up a bunch of ordinances to support these 15-minute cities. Also, I feel like we should probably look at Detroit and other places and like where the government, not we, but the government's, created housing projects. Are we just creating projects here? Like every time these things are built, they're always massive failures. So I feel like we have enough history. We could look at that and go, well, that's probably a bad idea. Then here come the Democrats with their terrible ideas. So
Definitely. We'll have Cabrini Green on every small town in Colorado, this high density affordable housing that they don't have to pay anything for to be there. And they can take the train all over the state. And everybody who's a productive member of society has to pay for it. That's what's wrong with that.
yeah.
So
It's going
bad
to be,
bill. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say it's going to be impossible to live here because of how much they're going to tax us after how much this actually costs. Look how much it costs to live in California right now and what they're doing with their high density rail or with their high speed rail right now. That project's an absolute disaster.
Definitely. This centrally planned schemes never work. I mean, it's the Soviet Union all over again, where, they're going to try and design society based on how some bureaucrat thinks it should be designed, not how actual individuals through the market express how they want it designed.
Absolutely.
So horrible bill. Um, on the calendar for Tuesday in the Senate Local Government and Housing Committee. Also in the Senate Local Government and Housing Committee is one of the accessory dwelling units or ADU bills. There's actually two ADU bills this year. But this bill, Senate House Bill 1152, will increase the number of accessory dwelling units and make an appropriation. So we do see Ron Weinberg, Republican, co-sponsoring this bill. It creates a series of requirements related to these accessory dwelling units, establishing unique requirements for subject jurisdictions and for qualifying as an accessory dwelling unit supportive jurisdiction. So basically, it's the same kind of idea of this top-down management of society regarding housing codes and housing laws, where the state legislature wants to tell local communities when and where they can have affordable dwelling units, aka your little mother-in-law cottage, or garage you convert into a bedroom in the back of your yard. So this bill has been amended quite a bit. Anytime you see italics and strike throughs, that means that's amendments to the original bill as introduced. Looking at the fiscal note here usually gives you a better update of what it is, but it's going to basically create this whole new program within the Division of Housing, the Department of Local Affairs, to encourage the construction, conversion, and use of ADUs. So, there you go in terms of changing zoning laws in local communities that might not want it, right? Let local communities do it if they want to, but don't force it upon them by the state, I would say. So bad bill being heard in Tuesday, Local Government Housing Committee, Senate Committee Room 352, 2 p.m., April 23rd. Moving on from Tuesday, let's jump over to Wednesday. Only a couple bills here, but of course, some very interesting bills. I think a lot of people are going to be upset about 1262, the maternal health midwife bill. So they want to regulate and license midwives in Colorado. Really, really horrible idea. Of course, looking at the bill sponsors, it's not too surprising. So right now, current law requires direct entry midwives to register with a division of professions and occupations before practicing. This bill will make changes that they need to update the title of them to certified professional midwives and change the regulation from registration to licensure. So they want to license midwives in Colorado. So this goes on, of course, to what that's going to look like in terms of creating this new licensing scheme. But basically, the idea is the state wants control over midwives. And there you go. So bad bill.
Do you know, do midwives practice here in Colorado? Are they legally able?
Yes, they are able to.
So the fact they're trying to regulate this, I mean, I'm not surprised. Lorena Garcia likes to regulate women and children all the time, and yet she doesn't have children and has never been pregnant. I've been overseen by both the regular course of doctors and all of that for maternal care, and I've received care from a midwife in preparation to have a home birth. And I have to tell you, the difference in care is astounding. My midwives would meet with me for at least an hour every appointment. The doctor sees you, talks to you for about 15 minutes, and they're done with you. These people clearly have no idea the level of care midwifery gives women. It actually gives care and support to women and prevents a ton of birth trauma. And the regular course of the way people have through the hospitals and the doctors is filled with birth trauma, and this is reprehensible. It's awful.
100% reprehensible. Looking at some of the more details on the bill for people there. So direct entry midwives currently are licensed, but it's just a registration. So to be a practicing midwife in Colorado, you just register with the government. Still not a good idea. They shouldn't be doing that anyway, but that's how it is right now. So these people think it's a little too loose, is what I imagine. So now they want direct entry midwives they're currently required to have certain certifications to be licensed that would allow them the designation of this certified professional midwife. So it codifies current practice, updating references of registration to licensure and direct entry midwife to certified professional midwife, and clarifies the certification requirements. So it requires the membership of certain committees, boards, and programs to include midwifery expertise, including the Environmental Justice Advisory Board, Health Equity Commission, Governor's Expert Emergency Epidemic Response Committee, and the Short-Term Healthcare Credentials Program. So there you go. Really, if this was a good pro-liberty bill in support of women, in support of mothers, in support of midwives, then they should eliminate any type of registration or licensure scheme for midwives here in Colorado. And that would really be the pro-liberty position on this bill. But unfortunately, it's going in the wrong direction here. So there we go. Bad bill being heard Wednesday in the Health and Human Services Committee upon adjournment of the Senate in Senate Committee Room 357. That's Wednesday, April 24th. Show up, testify, speak out, people. Make your voice heard. If you're involved in midwifery or concerned about this issue, then definitely make your voice heard on this bill. House Bill 1262. All right. Also on Wednesday, Senate Bill 205, Consumer Protections for Artificial Intelligence. Had to include this one just because, artificial intelligence, this AI has been such a hot topic. Always interesting to see when the legislature tries to regulate something like this. So the bill requires a developer of high-risk artificial intelligence system to use reasonable care to avoid algorithmic discrimination in a high-risk system. There you go. What does that mean? There is a rebuttable presumption that the developer used reasonable care if the developer complied with specified provisions in the bill. So making available to a developer of a high-risk system a statement disclosing specified information about the high-risk system. I mean, this goes on and on about creating this high-risk system that the AI algorithm is not going to discriminate towards people. So, interesting, a lot of gobbledygook here about trying to regulate AI. Look at the fiscal note for a little bit more clarity here. The bill establishes standards and requirements for those who develop or deploy artificial intelligence systems to protect against algorithmic discrimination. This includes risk management strategies, impact assessments, and annual reviews. Those who deploy certain AI systems must publish to the public a statement summarizing the types of systems they deploy and how they manage any known risks. Wow. Whenever a consumer interacts with an AI system, the developer must disclose it unless it would be obvious to a reasonable person that they are interacting with an AI system. Any synthetic digital content produced by an AI system must be marked and detectable in a machine-readable format in a manner apparent to consumers. A violation of these provisions constitutes a deceptive trade practice, which is enforced by the Attorney General and district attorneys. Interesting. So you could get a $20,000 violation for each time you are using AI or developing AI or deploying AI in a manner that this bill sponsor does not agree with. So kind of a ridiculous bill in my mind. Something that definitely would stifle the industry or stifle development and technological advancement. But of course, not surprised to see people wanting to go after artificial intelligence because of the fear around it.
And I mean, it's so the definition is so nebulous that you just still don't know what they're talking about, even after you read the bill.
Yeah, what is algorithmic discrimination? Seeing that Rodriguez is the only sponsor in the Senate with no House member, nobody else attached, shows me that this bill is probably not going anywhere. But it's nonetheless, bills like this could take years to get out there, and you develop the legislation over the course of several years. But yeah, what do they mean by discrimination exactly from AI?
It
It's a good
means whatever
question.
they want it to mean, and they can change the definition at any time.
So the bill defines algorithmic discrimination, any condition in which the artificial intelligence system materially increases the risk of an unlawful differential treatment or impact that disfavors an individual or group of individuals on the basis of their actual or perceived age, color, disability, ethnicity, genetic information, limited proficiency in the English language, national origin, race, religion, reproductive health, sex, veteran status, or other classification protected under the laws of this state. So wow, there you go. They got to make sure the AI is following along with anti-discrimination laws, of course. There you go. What do you say about this? So Senator Robert Rodriguez, bad bill, interesting bill, nonetheless, being heard Wednesday in the Judiciary Committee at 1:30 p.m. in the old Supreme Court, April 24th. All right, we'll move on here. One more bill on Wednesday, discrimination in places of public accommodation. Definitely wanted to bring this one up because it is such a big bill. Interesting seeing some Republican co-sponsors, Matt Soper and Perry Will. We've talked about this a while back. A lot of amendments to this bill, as you can see. Uh, Basically, they changed it so the bill provides that a person may be fined $3,500 for violating the Colorado Anti-Discrimination Act. That's basically what they changed it to. A nonprofit does not directly or indirectly participate or intervene in a political campaign merely by renting out space for a political event at a nonprofit's customary or usual rates. So, interesting bill. Apparently, they're trying to crack down on discrimination, whatever that means. Of course, like you said, Hannah, that can mean anything according to them. It's going to mean hair length here soon enough, and trying to create some new fines and new systems to go after people who are doing it. So, just bake the cake. That's what they want. So interesting bill, been amended quite a bit, made it through the House. It'll be interesting to see what the Senate does with this bill, but it seems pretty watered down. Be in the Senate Judiciary Committee Wednesday, 1:30 p.m. in the old Supreme Court. All right, bad bill. Moving on to Thursday, the last day for committee hearings for this week. Here's one of the other bills 1304, minimum parking requirements. So as we saw with the previous bill there, 1313, they're trying to create high density housing around mass transit and then eliminating parking requirements. So, get rid of the parking lots because no one needs a car anymore. Get rid of the parking lots for apartment buildings and multifamily buildings. Instead, everybody can, we know people are still going to have their cars. They're still going to park in the street. They're still going to block things up. But of course, that's not the goal with this type of legislation.
The other thing is, so I didn't drive till I was 21. I had two children and I had to take public transit everywhere. Do you know how difficult it is with two children under the age of 2 to go grocery shopping on mass transit? I can tell you it is incredibly challenging. Um, the amount of issues, like it shouldn't be a luxury to take your car to the grocery store, get groceries, and bring them home. That's crazy to me. Um, so these people have never had a hard day in their life. Most of them, certainly they've never been homeless, and certainly they've never had to take and transport groceries on a bus. So I think it's laughable that they have all these grand ideas with zero experience of living that way themselves. You want to bet they all have cars? Do they take
Well,
public transit to the Capitol? No.
right, 100%. And I agree. And I bet none of these people live in apartment buildings. None of these people live in a place where there's high density housing. They pull into their driveway in their heated garage and pull their expensive car into there, and they don't have to worry about it. But for working class Coloradans who live in apartment buildings, who live out in areas where there's a lot of townhomes or duplexes and things like that, to say that these local municipalities can't or counties can't require a certain amount of parking spaces is going to cause problems. It's going to cause problems. Leave it up to the local municipality. Let them decide what's best for their community based on the situation that they're facing. It's ridiculous that these legislators think they can push this statewide rule, top-down management of parking spaces across Colorado. But of course, it fits into their agenda. They're trying to do everything they can to disincentivize people from driving cars, right? They don't want people in cars. They want to take our cars away from us. They want to force everybody into trains and buses, and it's going to be a total failure, create more poverty, and make life harder for average Coloradans.
I think this is going to put a big, for all these developments that they want to do this high density buildings and everything, this is going to be a challenge for all of these builders and contractors trying to go in there. How many of those people live in those apartments? And there's more than one person working, right? And you've got to have, they only allow for one parking spot because they want you to use that RTD system, but no one trusts it because it's so unsafe.
Very
Yeah.
true. Very, very true. So yeah, really bad bill. Micah Ritchie in the comments on YouTube says just build a monorail, monorail, monorail. Anybody remembers that Simpsons episode? Just get everybody on the monorail. It's only going to cost 10 times what they anticipate it, and it's going to fail all the time, just as we see as it goes. So this did pass the House. Bill did pass the House, is now in the Senate. It's a first Senate committee hearing, but we'll see. Unfortunately, a really bad bill. Just another example of these legislators trying to overrule home rule and override the concerns of local communities, not letting local governments or jurisdictions make up their own decisions of how their city or county should be organized. So bad bill. House Bill 1304, scheduled for Thursday in the Senate Local Government and Housing Committee. Also in that same committee is 1175. Another bad bill that fits in line with what the government's been trying, what these legislators have been trying to do for a while. House Bill 1175, local government's rights to property for affordable housing, concerning a local government right of first refusal or offer to purchase qualifying multifamily property for the purpose of providing long-term affordable housing or mixed income development. So we saw a stronger version of this bill fail last year. It was a really bad bill. This bill's a watered down version of it that's a little bit more tame to try and get it to pass. But the bill creates a right of first refusal and a right of first offer for local governments to certain types of multifamily rental properties. The right of first offer is temporary and terminates on December 31st, 2029 for multifamily rental properties or existing affordable housing consisting of not less than 5 units. A local government has the right of first refusal to match an acceptable offer for the purchase of such property, subject to the local government's commitment to using the property as long-term affordable housing. So, of course, this is a very bad bill because it's moving property from the private sector, from organizations or developers or whoever, That's creating this affordable housing and basically moving it to the purview of local governments, giving them ownership over property. So it's a property grab, and they're trying to create these affordable housing. And we've seen what's happened down at the hotels in Denver that they're housing a lot of the homeless population in. I mean, it's been a total disaster with a lot of crime and violence and drug use. And these affordable housing schemes, as we talked about earlier, it's Chicago, it's the Chicago policies. So terrible bill and affront to property rights. Another scheme to manage society based on the whims of these legislators. Really, really bad bill. This bill is being heard Thursday in the local government housing committee in the Senate, committee room 352, upon adjournment of the state Senate. So check that out. If you're interested, please reach out to the committee members and tell them to oppose this bill. So the other accessory dwelling units bill, Senate Bill 154, has been introduced, here, and is going to be heard there as well. But basically, it creates a series of requirements related to accessory dwelling units in subject jurisdictions. The subject jurisdiction is an unincorporated portion of the county. It would require that an unincorporated county to allow, and subject to administrative approval process, a conversion of an accessory dwelling unit, prohibits subject jurisdictions from applying a restrictive design or dimension standard to the accessory dwelling unit. So they're really big on this idea of pushing for accessory dwelling units. Obviously, housing is a big issue in Colorado. With the amount of immigrants, homeless people, and the like, they're really trying to scramble to find more housing options for them and trying to get people to build, little sheds in the backyard to house these people. It seems to be their agenda.
And they'll tax you over it.
Yeah, and then they'll tax you over and control it. And then, hey, now it's affordable housing. We're going to go ahead and buy that from you and then turn it into government housing, right?
Yep. Yes.
So this is a newer bill introduced on February 12th, but getting its first committee hearing. I think the other accessory dwelling bill, they wanted to see that go through first or see where that was at. This is the local government housing committee upon adjournment in the Senate committee room 352, April 25th. Very bad bill. People show up at these committee hearings, speak out, do everything you can to make your voice heard. All right, so a couple more bills here. Senate Bill 210 is something that deserves further exploration. It is a massive bill to change how Colorado's elections operate. Senate Bill 210 is a long bill. There's a lot to it, as you can read through here. Definitely something you should be interested in if you're involved in local politics. It's really going to take some time to dig in and go through it all. But nonetheless, they want to make some serious changes to elections in Colorado. So some of the changes here, just kind of some of the bullet points. The bill changes the age in which an individual may pre-register to vote from 16 to 15. Repeal the authorization for a 17-year-old who is pre-registered to vote as an 18-year-old in a general election from voting as a 17-year-old in the primary election or presidential primary election that precedes that general election. For political party organization, the bill specifies that when a state senatorial district or state representative district is comprised of one or more whole counties or of a part of one county and all or a part of one or more of the other counties, the state senatorial central committee or a state representative central committee consists of the elected precinct committee persons, as well as the chairpersons, vice chairpersons, and secretary of the several party county central committees who reside within the state senatorial district or the state representative district. So they're really changing how political parties can elect people to multi-county seats. Access to ballot by candidates. The bill specifies that the law prohibiting a candidate who is defeated in the primary election from participating in a general election does not apply to a candidate for president of the United States. It makes the deadlines for a candidate to file a petition in a congressional vacancy election consistent with other deadlines, makes a general timeline for circulating petitions to get on the ballot applicable to presidential electors for unaffiliated presidential candidates, aligns the minor political party candidate petition calendar with the major political party candidate petition calendar, clarifies that an unaffiliated candidate for president of the United States is exempt from the requirement that a candidate be registered as unaffiliated with the political party in the statewide voter registration system prior to the general election, repeals the ability of a pre-registrant to sign a petition to nominate a candidate for a primary election, requires a candidate or candidate committee, recall committee, or representative of a minor party petition to submit a paid circulator report, if applicable, to the Secretary of State, modifies the timing for a candidate to cure a nominating petition signature deficiency. The bill also goes with notice and preparation of elections. So there's a lot of stuff here, a lot of stuff with voter service and polling centers, changing how counties operate their drop boxes. I mean, this is a big bill that does a lot. I would say it definitely violates a single subject rule. It should not be trying to be so broad. I feel like that is extremely unconstitutional on its own. Changing how election judges are certified, how elections are conducted. I mean, there's a lot of stuff here. So I'm sure it's a lot of bad stuff, especially, from a minor party perspective, like the Libertarian Party.
Yeah, I'm deeply concerned about that. Um, I know that a lot of the minor parties, we work together to defeat things like this. Um, Regardless of, they don't understand minor party law anyway. They're not even in minor parties. So they're just obsessed with, trying to take as much power as they can out of our elections here, and the parties, and giving it to the cronies, as I say.
Definitely, yeah, really bad bill. Definitely deserves people to dive in there, especially from the minor parties, and really get involved because there's a lot of things they say it changes and modifies, but until you read the bill text, you don't know exactly how they're modifying it or changing it. My guess is it's making it harder for people. I would guess, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I would guess, I'm sure, but interesting nonetheless to see this bill. My guess is it's an anti-democratic bill. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Emily
Yeah.
Sirota has been terrible. Finberg's been absolutely horrific down there at the state capitol. This is the first time the bill is being heard. So, it's kind of late in the session. There's probably an opportunity to stop this bill with enough outcry and people getting involved. But this is going to be Thursday, April 25th in the State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee, 1:30 p.m. in the Old Supreme Court. Looking at the sponsors of the bill, there's only two sponsors on it. So my guess is this is a big bill that potentially can face some amendments, face some challenges, face some changes, but definitely a bill that, I highly recommend, obviously, Libertarian Party, any other minor party, really get involved and dig into this one and try and get some outcry or try and get some, coverage of this from the media, try and really hype up the fact that this is going to hurt ballot access, potentially hurt ballot access. I don't know that for a fact, but potentially hurt the ability for individuals to run for office and elect who they want to represent them. So it sounds like a really bad bill. So definitely check that one out, people, and show up on Thursday in the State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee at 1:30 p.m. in the Old Supreme Court. But definitely deserves somebody to dig into this and really go through and uh, and look at everything that's in there. So moving on, we got a couple more bills here for Thursday. Senate Committee or Concurrent Resolution 002, another election one from Fenberg as well. So modifying the constitutional election deadlines. So this is would go to the voters in Colorado in November if it's approved. So the state of Colorado would have an opportunity to vote on an amendment this year to the Colorado Constitution concerning the modification of certain deadlines in connection with specified elections. So they want to change how elections are operating. They want to change the date by which initiative petitions must be filed with the Secretary of State from at least 3 months before the general election, at which they are to be voted on, to at least 3 months and 1 week before that election. Change the date by which referendum petitions must be filed with the Secretary of State from not more than 90 days after the final adjournment of the session of the General Assembly that enacted the bill on which the referendum is demanded to not more than 83 days after the final adjournment of the session. Change the date by which the nonpartisan research staff of the General Assembly shall publish the text and title of every measure from at least 15 days prior to the final date of voter registration for the election of 45 days before the election. Change the period during which a justice of the Supreme Court or a judge of any other court must file with the Secretary of State a declaration of intent to run for another term from not more than 6 months or less than 3 months prior to the general election. Before the expiration of the judge's term to not more than 6 months and 1 week or less than 3 months and 1 week. So interesting bill. It'd be interesting to see if it shows up on the November election. So a lot of opportunity here to still dig into this one and get some good opposition if it is a bad bill. Interesting that the dates only changed slightly. That was interesting, changing it to basically adding another week here, changing it from 90 days to 83 days. There's definitely some strategy there. I'm sure they're trying to game the elections in their favor, of course. Why wouldn't they? But it'll be very interesting to get some more information on this one as well. Also being heard Thursday in the State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee at 1:30 p.m. in the Old Supreme Court, April 25th. So two big election bills being pushed through in that committee hearing. Moving along, we got two more bills to talk about, both bad bills, as you may expect. This is the dumbest bill, one of the dumber bills of the legislative session, 158, social media to protect juveniles, disclosure reports. Concerning social media companies and in connection therewith, establishing requirements for the operation of social media platforms by social media companies, authorizing the Attorney General to enforce the new requirements under the Colorado Consumer Protection Act, and making an appropriation. So this bill would require that on or before July 1st, 2025, a social media company must post published policies for each of its social media platforms. The social media company must post any updates to the policies within 14 days. It would include contact information that allows the user to ask the social media company questions about the policies, a description of the process that a user must follow to flag content groups or other users that the user believes violate the published policies, process in which the social media company commits for the purpose of responding to or resolving user questions and flags, a statement that the use of the social media platform for the sale or advertisement of any illicit substance, for the sale of any firearm in violation of state or federal law, for sex trafficking of a juvenile, or the possession, display, exchange, distribution, sale, or creation of, or the inducement to create sexually exploitive material is prohibited. So I know a lot of people were concerned that people wouldn't be able to talk about psychedelics that are now decriminalized in Colorado on some regard, or cannabis, illegal cannabis in Colorado because it's federally illegal, that nobody be able to post about it on social media. If you're talking about selling it or advertising it, then they'd be banned. So a lot of bad stuff here. It's definitely a First Amendment issue. They're really going after social media companies. And of course, this is all leading to the point where the social media companies have to be able to prove if an individual is over 18. Well, how are you going to do that except use your digital ID and this and that? So, although, well, that's not in the bill, it does set up that kind of possibility. So very bad bill, Senate Bill 158. It's getting a lot of outcry from a lot of the cannabis industry and other people out there. It's one of those stupid but feel good bills to protect kids, but it's going to cause some serious issues for everybody else. So Senate Bill 158, bad bill. Being heard on Thursday in the House Education Committee. Not sure why it'd be in education, but nonetheless, House Committee Room 107 at 1:30 p.m. Looking at the bill history, it's made all the way through the Senate, so probably something like this will pass the House, unfortunately. Pretty ridiculous. Okay, Thursday, Senate Bill 173, regulate the mortuary science occupations. So they want to create a new licensing scheme to be a funeral director, mortuary science practitioner, embalmer, cremationist, or natural reductionist. Of course, there were some issues earlier this year or last year with some funeral home directors acting improperly and not disposing of bodies properly and causing all these major issues. So this is a very reactive bill to regulate the funeral industry. I think it's not necessary. I'll let the market do it. And a bad bill just because they have a license doesn't mean they're necessarily going to do a better job. So Senate Bill 173, bad bill. We've talked about this bill before, of course. It's made it all the way through the Senate and is now going into the House, to the Finance Committee here on Thursday, House Committee Room 112. So that's what we got for this week, everybody. Those are some of the big bills being heard down at the state legislature and committee hearings. Feel free to take some screenshots of this, get involved, show up. Everything can be found at leg.colorado.gov. That's really your one-stop shop. Really interesting bills of the week. So check that out and do some research, get involved, keep speaking out, people keep showing up. It's liberty only lasts as long as people are eternally vigilant, right? Now, like every week, we got some specific bills we've been watching. So we're going to go jump in here and take a look at some of these, kind of give you an update on where they're at. Here's two new bills added to the watch list this week, something we haven't talked about before. They kind of snuck through. We weren't able to catch them on our weekly calls. But this is a big bill. There's a couple bills having to do with the migrant crisis down in Denver. So this is creating a welcome reception and integration grant program. It's going to be heard Monday on the House floor at 9 a.m. Starting at 9 a.m. is when the House floor convenes. But creating a grant program for community-based organizations to provide appropriate services for migrants who are within 1 year of arrival in the United States. So there you go, sending taxpayer money to these community-based organizations, which I'm sure are going to be politically connected. I mean, how would they not be politically connected to some of these legislators down there? And of course, they can get some money to get people into the community. So it's $2.5 million from the general fund to this grant program. So that's $2.5 million. I mean, regardless of what you think about the immigration issue, it is one of the hottest issues for Colorado voters. So, anybody who votes for this, you could definitely make the case that they're sending $2.5 million of taxpayer money and spending it on migrants, and when everybody else is struggling so hard, for them to do that, I think could bite them come election time if it's marketed properly.
Brandon, can you go to the financial part of fiscal note on this one? The one, remember the last bill, they tried to put this one through and they were hitting our Tabor. So is this hitting Tabor or no? This is
I
just
don't
the
see.
general fund.
Yep, it's just pulling the money out of the general fund. I'm surprised actually they're not pulling out the Tabor Reserve
Well,
or
they did
the.
on that other one. That's why I was asking. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. It's good, worth asking and worth checking for sure. But yeah, just creating this, going to nonprofits. I'm sure politically connected, going out there, $2.5 million of Colorado taxpayer money.
I testified on that one 2 weeks ago, and we were really one shy. It was the chair that made the switch. It would have been killed. And when it was hit, it was hurting our Tabor fund. It was like 128 million and only maybe more than that of our Tabor and only 123,000 of general. But the chair said, well, I'm going to give you a shot at it. And oh my goodness, it went through.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. So this bill made it through House committees and it'll be heard on the House floor tomorrow. So tune into the Colorado channel on YouTube if you want to follow along there. But I think this is a bill that could be used to hurt some of these Democratic politicians come election time. Regardless of what people think on the issue, the idea of spending taxpayer money in this regard definitely will make a lot of people upset. So that's one of the bills we're watching. Additionally, another one here, Senate Bill 182 is going to be heard on the Senate tomorrow, 10 a.m., April 22nd. Immigrant identification document issuance, concerning the requirements to issue an identification document under the Colorado Road and Community Safety Act to an individual who's not lawfully present in the United States. So basically, authorizing the use of giving driver's licenses to people who are here not lawfully, illegally, I guess you could say as well. So there you go. So they can get you the ID, but you have to make sure you're filing for taxes. You have to do a lot of stuff here. Well, that's how it used to be. Unfortunately, this bill's changing these requirements, repealing the requirement that the applicant have filed a Colorado resident income tax return, repealing the requirement that they demonstrate being a resident of the state, repealing the requirement that they provide a documented social security number or a taxpayer identification number, and then adding to the following documents a list of acceptable identification documents, a photocopy of a passport issued by the applicant's country of origin. So if you have a fake passport from another country, it's going to be real easy for you to get a Colorado driver's license, or a voter identification card with a photograph issued by a different country, a driver's license instruction permit issued by your country of origin, an identifying document issued by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, an identification card issued under the Intensive Supervision Appearance Program by United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement, a verification of release identification card issued by the Office of Refugee Resettlement in the United States. So interesting bill, definitely a contentious issue, but nonetheless, giving people driver's licenses here in Colorado who are not here legally could cause some serious issues.
It goes from undocumented to documented that way also.
That's a good point.
I know that because that's what they did in California. So I lived in California for like 13 years. And that's one of the little tricks they did to change the status from undocumented to documented. So it doesn't surprise me that they're doing it here in Colorado now. And of course, our best friend, Tim Hernandez, is on that.
Tells you all you need to know right there, right?
Give me Hamas.
So, there you go. Interesting bill. Did make it through the Senate committees and is going to be on the Senate floor. So I think this is another bill that people involved in elections this year should watch for and potentially use come election time. So keep an eye on that one. House Bill 1098, the cause required for eviction of a residential tenant, making it harder to evict people at the whim of landlords and property owners, instead getting the government involved in that relationship. Jared Polis did sign that into law. There's a picture of his signature on the signed bill right there. So the anti-landlord, anti-property owner, anti-rental company law did get signed into law by Jared Polis. There you go. House Bill 1292, of course, one of the most contentious bills this year, the widespread gun ban. It has not been assigned. It's been assigned to a committee in the Senate, but that is not showing up on the calendar yet. I'm sure we'll probably see something this week when it's going to be assigned. Hopefully not this week. Hopefully it gets delayed longer and longer. Senate Bill 75. This is the one trying to regulate transportation companies like Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, etc. This is the more toned down version of it. It's a bad bill. It's going to be in the Appropriations Committee this coming week. The other protections for delivery network company drivers, another anti-Uber Lyft company type of bill. House Bill 1129 is going to be heard on the House floor on Monday, April 22nd, tomorrow, starting at 9 a.m. So some bad bills there. Hey, the raw milk bill finally got a committee hearing. Second committee in appropriations, so April 23rd in the House Appropriations, or Senate Appropriations Committee, excuse me, LSBB, 8 a.m. So we'll see where that bill goes. Of course, the 1174, the concealed carry and permit bill, horrible, horrible bill being heard on the Senate floor April 22nd. This is the bill that people should definitely be watching and tracking the votes on for these senators on Monday, April 22nd. The modifications to the Colorado Open Records Act, a really bad bill, making it harder for people to have transparent access to what the government and politicians are doing. Has passed the state house, but is not yet assigned to a Senate committee yet. So we'll keep an eye on that. That's a really bad bill. Prohibiting carrying of firearms in sensitive spaces, also a bad bill, will be heard Monday on the House floor. So track those votes, people. Senate Bill 131, House floor, Monday, April 22nd. The anti-using your cell phone and driving bill, creating new civil penalties for people using their cell phones and driving, does not have its next committee hearing scheduled yet. House Bill 1039, the non-legal name changes did pass. Polis has not signed the bill yet. It'll be interesting to see if he does or just lets it become law without his signature. That is going to become law unless he vetoes it, which expect him to let it pass.
Hey, Brandon, you just brought up vetoes. I got a quick question for you. Do you expect any bills to get vetoed by Polis if they were to pass
It's a good
this
question.
session?
I think he would. I think he would veto some bills. I'm not sure exactly which ones right now, but I could see him doing it. You know, he's all about setting himself up for the presidential election in 4 years. That's his big goal, of course. So whatever he can do to help position himself for that, I think he would do it. But it'd be interesting to see what he ends up doing. You know, but we'll see. I don't know. I couldn't name any specific bills right now. I could see him vetoing.
Yeah, me either.
The overdose prevention centers bill did get killed. House Bill 1028 got killed in its first Senate committee hearing. Not surprising there, third year in a row. So good news or bad news, depending on your perspective, but that bill did stop. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation Gestapo bill giving $1.7 million to have them go after firearm dealers. It did pass the Senate. It's moving on to the House, but that committee hearing is not yet scheduled. We'll keep an eye on that. The firearm liability insurance requirement did pass the House, unfortunately. 1270 has not been assigned to a Senate committee yet. So people track the votes on that one for sure. Stephanie Looks good bill to publish bill drafts online before the session has made it through one committee, but the next committee has not been scheduled yet. Senate Bill 33, we mentioned the lodging property tax bill was killed. The towing carrier regulation bill is going to be heard on the House. This is a bad bill, creating a new licensing system for tow truck companies. Really bad stuff. Be heard on the House floor on Monday, April 22nd. The alcohol beverage retail licenses, really bad bill trying to prohibit retailers from selling hard alcohol unless they're an actual liquor store. That bill has not got its next committee hearing scheduled yet. We'll keep an eye on that. And then some of the bills that died that we're happy about, Senate Bill 22, trying to ban flavored tobacco products did get killed. Pet animal registration system did get killed, of course. Always get to celebrate that. Unfortunately, a really good bill did get killed as well, the reduction of the state income tax. The vulnerable road user protection enterprise did get killed. That was a good thing there. The anti-oil and gas bill, the worst one out there, Senate Bill 159 was killed. And there you go. So that's what we got so far. That's where we're at. Open the floor up for any general discussion. Anything else to talk about or bring up from any of our panelists here?
I like something the YouTube commenter said. Joseph said, "Would like to see a law limiting the number of bills proposed per year per legislator. because there's been too many bills proposed this year.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. I mean, I think it should be down to they should give them, maybe one bill a year
Yeah.
instead of five plus. Yeah, good comment, Joseph. So perfect. Well, appreciate everybody joining. We do this every week. Please share these videos. Please encourage people to get involved, speak out. And one of the most important aspects from my perspective is keeping track of the votes of these legislators and really trying to hold them accountable come November because they need to face election consequences if we're wanting to change the direction of the political environment of our state. So perfect.
Mhm.
Any other final comments here?
It's going to be a busy week. Yeah,
Abs
thank you.
One
Yeah,
last thing. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say thank you, Jody. Thank you for showing up on our
Thank
calls. Thank you for showing up down at the state capitol to testify.
thank you for everything you do.
One last thing I want to bring up is I just want to make sure people don't get discouraged or start feeling like nothing really matters, nothing you can do really matters. Your voice does count, and even if they push everything through, just remember, keep the fight up. And we have an election coming up in November, and elections have consequences, and what you do during legislative session has consequences. Make sure to push uh make sure to push the narrative, go on the offensive, show everybody what monsters are down at the Capitol. We have Epps Hernandez, we have Mabre, we have Lorena Garcia, we have Stephanie Vigil. There's a lot of really terrible legislators down there, and we need to make sure that we're telling the public to get out there and vote and that your voice matters, and other people are mad just like you, and Colorado is not completely lost, and today's the day that we turn this thing around.
Well said, Michael. 100%. 100%. Don't despair, people. I mean, look at some of the bad bills that did die this year. It's not a foregone conclusion that we're going to become the next California as much as some of these people would want it to go. But fortunately, there's still opportunity here. Check out freestatecolorado.com/testify for an in-depth guide I wrote last year, kind of giving you all the information to testify down at the state capitol, trying to make it easy for people. It's really accessible. It's a great way to do it. So show up at these committee hearings and
I want to
get
say that
involved.
I really thank you all. Really, I really enjoy this because I have a lot of signal groups, being a judge in the elections, election integrity, being involved with the, bills down there, parental rights, all these issues. I've got lots of signal groups. I'm going to be sharing a lot of your things tonight. Thank you.
Awesome, Jody. Yeah, share these videos, invite people to join us on these live streams, and we respond to people in the comments. If you people want to be on the panel and discuss these bills with us every week, please reach out.
Have a good night. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Jody.
All right, appreciate everybody. Thank you, Jody. Thank you, Hannah Goodman, Chair of the Libertarian Party of Colorado. Thank you, Michael Vance, Legislative Director, Libertarian Party of Colorado. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, and we'll talk to you guys soon. See you next week and maybe sooner. New content coming out.
See you, everybody.
All right.